Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm kind of excited to talk about this connection between food and faith. So, yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's great to connect and yeah, just have a great conversation.
Well, I think the best place to start is knowing a little bit about you, where you grew up, um, and kind of what led you to this where you are, and what was the role since were trained as a chef? What was the role of food in your life growing up?
No, yeah, I grew up in Orange County, California. We moved there in '85. And my parents still live in the same house. And so it's cool to take our kids now there. But food or the table played a really important role. My parents thought it was vital that we as a family have not only dinner together every night, but breakfast together. And
Wow.
you're not wrong. um, and so that's the tension of like, okay, how do we create and use the table as a means of welcome, um, and allowing people to experience God? And I think it starts in the church. I've never understood why we don't allow non-Christians to take communion, because you're like, people like growing up evangelical people will say, well, they're going to heap condemnation on their heads. Well, I'm like, well, you already think they're condemned, so like what more condemnation do you are they going to experience? Like, couldn't it be a token of God's grace, and couldn't it be a place in which they receive Christ for the first time, um, where we can be the body and blood of Christ to them in some way that we can't imagine? And like, why not? And so it's tricky, right? Like, and I think the white evangelical world in which I have lived, and I'm thankful for it, but it has feels like it has a restricted imagination of the table. Like, and maybe it's from the Reformation. I'm sure it's complicated, right? There's no easy way to say it, but like the way the preaching has become like the end all be all, like it, we miss something relationally, because that's one way, like, like it's one way communication, whereas the table is face to face, like conversing, shoulder to shoulder. um and so I think we're missing something, and I think it starts with the Lord's Supper. I think when we think it's sort of, well, if we have time to do it, or oh, we can squeeze it in here, or maybe we give lip service to it for, and maybe it's some of my not being a pastor anymore. It's like, okay, you start seeing, or, you can say, I can start saying things which I really felt. And so, yeah, I think we're missing something by not challenging people to sit at the table. And I think part of it is American culture too. Like it's all intertwined, right, Dennis? Like, it's not an easy, like, okay, we just got to pull this one string and we can untangle it and do something. Like, American culture doesn't have a food culture. Um, I think Michael Pollan in his like Omnivore's Dilemma talked about like French the French are guided by certain hospitality and dietary like traditions that we just lost, and maybe it's because of the beauty of the diversity we do have, you know, um, something got lost, and so we don't have these rules that help govern how we eat and how we linger at a table. And so now it's like, you know, you. I think you listened to my conversation with Andy Root, and he talks about like the fact that like his kids have 10 minutes to scarf down their lunch at school, and you're like, what, like, you know, why? Like, what are we doing? And um, why are we short circuiting this important aspect of what it means to be human? So yeah, again, it's convoluted and it's hard to like figure. Okay, because there's not one thing, and again, as a white evangelical male, like we really love making sure it's like, okay, what's the one thing we can do to change it? And I'm like, I don't. It's there's nothing we can do. um,
Yeah, it's fascinating. The tradition that I'm in, which is the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
mm-hmm,
it's a mainline denomination, and one of the things that's kind of our hallmark is that we have communion every Sunday.
Right.
So the table kind of center is very important. And one thing that I remember a pastor once saying, actually was our general minister and president, and it was on a kind of a fraught issue on sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
is how we remain at the table,
Hmm.
even when we don't agree with each other. Um, and I think that's something that's important in our culture, um, is remaining at the table. And I think that that's very hard, um, because and this is something I don't blame one side for it, it's everyone, is that we tend to think that the other side isn't simply wrong or misguided, but evil in
Right.
some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But if you read the Bible, and as you've said, when Jesus sat at tables, sometimes he sat at tables where people were opposed to one another or
Right.
they didn't understand one another. Um,
Yeah. No, and I think it is. It is a hard, because again, the culture wants to pull us apart and divide us, and
mhm.
not just divide us, but like demonize the other side, or like, I don't feel safe with what you're saying. And there is a place for safety, right? We got to, make sure people are
Oh
safe.
yeah.
But I think at times it's like, well, I disagree with you. And so instead of doing the hard work of understanding, and I fall into this trap too, of like, um, you- not wanting to stay at the table, but like how, if we're brothers and sisters in Christ, how do we do the hard work of listening and understanding, um, and trying to make love more important than truth, like, and that sounds, but like, again, like the fruit of the spirit is love and joy and peace and patience, and truth telling doesn't fall there. Like, there is a place for truth, but like the fruit of the spirit isn't me standing there telling you the truth. Like, it's me being loving and patient and kind and gentle and pursuing peace for everyone, even if that means what the peace you need means I need to sacrifice for the greater good. Like, and so that's what I think the table invites us to, but it's so hard and long and slow, um, that none of us want to do it.